They found her at dawn, still in yesterday's clothes, curled up on a stranger's doorstep 3 miles from home. No memory of how she got there. No explanation for the cuts on her hands or the mud caked under her fingernails. When Linda Morrison finally opened her eyes that morning, her daughter's wedding was supposed to start in 2 hours. But she wasn't at home, she wasn't at the venue, and the last thing she remembered was sitting down for just a moment the night before. What happened in those missing hours would unravel a truth no one saw coming. A truth that would stop the wedding, shake a small Virginia town, and force a family to confront a secret buried for over 30 years. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This is the story of a mother who vanished in her sleep and woke up to a nightmare she couldn't explain. A story about exhaustion, memory, and the terrifying moment when the people closest to you realize they never truly knew you at all. Who moved Linda while she slept? Why did she wake up at an abandoned house 3 miles from home? Why was the wedding delayed for hours? And what was the secret that had been buried for more than 3 decades? What did Linda see in those missing hours? Who was the woman from the house? And why did everything Linda thought she knew about herself turn out to be a lie? Linda Morrison was 56 years old, a third-grade teacher in Charlottesville, Virginia, known for her kindness, her reliability, and her devotion to her only daughter, Emma. For months, she had poured every ounce of energy into planning Emma's wedding. She handled the flowers, the seating charts, the last-minute vendor calls, everything. Friends told her to slow down. Her husband, Greg, begged her to hire a coordinator, but Linda insisted she could do it herself. She wanted everything to be perfect. She wanted Emma to have the day she deserved. But in the weeks leading up to the wedding, something began to shift. Linda started forgetting things, small things at first. She would walk into a room and forget why. She would lose her keys, then find them in the freezer. She would wake up exhausted even after a full night's sleep. Greg noticed her staring off into space during dinner, her fork halfway to her mouth, her eyes distant. When he asked if she was okay, she would smile and say she was just tired, just wedding stress, nothing to worry about. But deep down, Linda knew something was wrong. She had been having dreams, strange, vivid dreams that felt less like imagination and more like memories. Dreams of a house she didn't recognize. Dreams of a woman's voice calling her name. Dreams of running through the woods at night, branches scraping her arms, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She would wake up with her heart pounding, her sheets soaked with sweat, and she would tell herself it was just stress, just her mind playing tricks. But the dreams kept coming, night after night, growing sharper, more real, until she could no longer tell where sleep ended and waking began. The night before the wedding, Linda stayed late at the venue to finish the decorations. Emma had offered to help, but Linda insisted she go home and rest. It was nearly midnight when Linda finally stepped back and looked at the room. The lights were strung perfectly. The flowers were arranged just right. Everything was ready. She sat down in one of the chairs near the entrance, just for a moment, just to catch her breath. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your ears. She closed her eyes, just for a second, just to rest, and then everything went dark. When she opened her eyes again, it was still dark, but she wasn't in the wedding hall. She was lying on cold concrete, her cheek pressed against something rough. The air smelled like mildew and wet earth. She sat up slowly, her head pounding, her vision blurry. Where was she? She tried to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her. Her hands were scraped and bleeding. Her dress, the one she had worn to the venue, was torn at the hem and streaked with dirt. Her phone was gone. Her purse was gone. Panic began to creep in, slow and suffocating. She looked around. She was on a porch, a narrow, sagging porch, attached to a house she didn't recognize. The paint was peeling. The windows were dark. There were no streetlights, no cars, no signs of life. Just trees, thick and silent, pressing in from all sides. Her breath came faster. She tried to remember. She remembered sitting down at the venue. She remembered closing her eyes. And then nothing. How did she get here? How long had she been unconscious? She stood up, steadying herself against the wall. and walked to the edge of the porch. The sky was beginning to lighten, a pale gray creeping over the horizon. Dawn. The wedding was supposed to start at 10. She had no idea what time it was now, but she knew she was running out of time. She stumbled down the porch steps and onto a dirt path. Her shoes were missing, her feet were bare and bloody. She didn't remember losing her shoes. She didn't remember walking. But the evidence was there, in the cuts on her soles, in the mud between her toes, in the strange, gnawing certainty that she had been somewhere, done something, in the hours she couldn't recall. If this story already has you wondering what's going on, comment "I'm still watching." Let's see the real story, lovers, here. She followed the path through the trees, her heart hammering in her chest. The woods were dense, the branches overhead blocking out most of the early morning light. She kept walking, her breath ragged, her mind racing, and then she saw it, a ribbon, pale blue and satin, hanging from a low branch. She stopped. She knew that ribbon. She had tied dozens of them herself, on the chairs at the wedding venue. But how did one end up here, miles from anywhere, in the middle of the woods? She reached out and touched it, her fingers trembling, and that's when she heard it. Footsteps. Behind her, slow, deliberate, crunching through the leaves. She turned, her throat tight, her pulse roaring in her ears. But there was no one there. Just trees. Just shadows. Just the sound of her own breathing, loud and desperate in the stillness. She ran. She didn't know where she was going, but she ran, her bare feet pounding against the dirt, her lungs burning. She ran until she saw a road, a narrow two-lane highway cutting through the trees. She stumbled onto the asphalt, waving her arms, and a car screeched to a stop. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, rolled down his window. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Linda opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. She didn't know if she was okay. She didn't know anything anymore. Meanwhile, back in Charlottesville, Emma Morrison was pacing the living room of her childhood home, her phone pressed to her ear, calling her mother for the 15th time. No answer. Greg stood by the window, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. "She probably just fell asleep at the venue," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She's been so tired lately." Emma shook her head. "She wouldn't do that. Not today, not on my wedding day." She hung up and dialed again. Still nothing. By 7 in the morning, Greg drove to the venue. The door was unlocked. The lights were still on. Linda's purse was on the floor near the entrance, her phone inside, untouched. Her car was still in the parking lot. But Linda was gone. Greg called the police. Within an hour, a search was underway. Friends, family, wedding guests who had arrived early, all of them fanning out across town, calling Linda's name, checking hospitals, knocking on doors. Emma sat in the bridal suite at the venue, still in her robe, her makeup half done, her hands shaking as she clutched her phone. "Where is she?" she whispered. "Where did she go?" The man who found Linda on the highway drove her to the nearest police station. She sat in a small room with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. The officer across from her, a woman in her 40s with a calm, steady voice, asked her questions. "Can you tell me your name?" "Linda Morrison." "Do you know what day it is?" Linda hesitated. "Saturday. My daughter's wedding day." "Do you remember how you got to that house?" Linda stared down at her hands. "No, I don't remember anything." The officer leaned forward. "The house you were found at, do you know who it belongs to?" Linda shook her head. The officer pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. It was the house, weathered and abandoned, surrounded by trees. "This property has been empty for almost 30 years, the officer said. "It used to belong to a woman named Margaret Hale. Does that name mean anything to you?" Linda felt something cold settle in her chest. "No," she said. But even as she said it, something flickered in the back of her mind, a shadow of a memory she couldn't quite reach. "Margaret Hale died in 1994, the officer continued. "She lived alone, no family, no visitors. When they found her, she'd been dead for weeks." Linda swallowed hard. "Why are you telling me this?" The officer's expression softened. Because we found something else at the house this morning. In the mailbox, an envelope, addressed to you. Linda's hands trembled as the officer placed the envelope in front of her. It was old, yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. Her name, Linda Morrison, written in careful, looping handwriting. She looked up at the officer. "I don't understand." "Neither do we," the officer said. "But I think you should open it." Linda picked up the envelope, her fingers numb. She tore it open and pulled out a single sheet of paper, folded in half. The handwriting was the same, neat and deliberate. She read the words, and her world tilted. "Linda, if you're reading this, then you've found your way back. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth when it mattered. I'm sorry I left you the way I did. But you need to know, you need to remember, you are my daughter, and I loved you more than anything in this world. Please forgive me. Please protect Emma the way I couldn't protect you. Margaret." The room seemed to shrink around her. Linda read the letter again, then a third time, but the words didn't change. Margaret Hale, her mother. But that was impossible. Linda's mother was Catherine Morrison. She had raised Linda, loved her, been there for every moment of her life until she passed away 10 years ago. Or so Linda had always believed. The officer spoke gently. "Linda, we ran your name through our system. Your birth certificate lists Catherine Morrison as your mother. But we also found an old adoption record, sealed until now. Catherine Morrison adopted you when you were 3 years old. Your biological mother was Margaret Hale." Linda felt the floor drop out from beneath her. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." But even as she said it, fragments began to surface. The dreams, the house in the woods, the woman's voice calling her name. They weren't dreams, they were memories, buried, suppressed, locked away for decades. She remembered now, in sudden, sickening flashes. She remembered being small, so small, living in that house with a woman who smelled like lavender and sang while she cooked. She remembered the woman's face, pale and sad, always sad. She remembered the day men came to the door, men in uniforms, and the woman, Margaret, her mother, kneeling down and whispering, "I love you. I'll always love you." And then she was gone, taken away, placed in a new home with new parents who told her to forget. Who told her it was better this way, who gave her a new life, a safe life, a normal life. But the memories didn't disappear. They just sank deeper, waiting. Linda sat in stunned silence, the letter still clutched in her hand. The officer gave her space, let her breathe, let her process. Finally, Linda looked up. "Why did she give me up?" The officer hesitated. According to the records, Margaret was deemed unfit. She had severe mental health issues, depression, hallucinations. She couldn't care for you. The state intervened. But from what we can tell, she never stopped thinking about you. She lived in that house alone for the rest of her life. And she left that letter, waiting for you to find it. Linda's throat tightened. "But how did I end up there last night? How did I know where to go?" The officer shook her head. "We don't know, but we think your mind brought you there. Stress, exhaustion, trauma, they can unlock things we've buried. You walked 3 miles in your sleep, Linda. You found your way to the one place your subconscious never forgot." Linda closed her eyes. The missing hours, the cuts on her hands, the mud on her feet, it all made sense now. She hadn't been taken. She had gone. Her body had remembered what her mind refused to. And it had led her back to the woman who gave her life, the woman who loved her, the woman she had been told to forget. By the time Greg arrived at the police station, it was nearly 9 in the morning. He rushed into the room, his face pale, his eyes wide with relief and fear. "Linda, my God, are you okay?" Linda looked up at him, and for the first time in hours, she felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I'm okay," she whispered. "But I need to tell you something. I need to tell Emma." Greg sat beside her, taking her hand, and Linda began to speak. She told him everything, the letter, the memories, the truth about who she really was. She told him about Margaret Hale, the mother she never knew she had, the mother who had been waiting for her in the silence of an abandoned house. Greg listened, his hand tightening around hers, his expression shifting from shock to understanding. "You don't have to do this today," he said gently. "We can postpone the wedding. Emma will understand." But Linda shook her head. "No. Emma deserves her day. She deserves to be happy. And I need to be there for her. I need to show her that no matter what secrets we carry, no matter what pain we bury, love is what survives. Love is what matters." Greg's eyes filled with tears, and he pulled her into his arms. By 10:30, Linda stood in the bridal suite, cleaned up, bandaged, dressed in the soft lavender dress she had chosen months ago. Emma looked at her mother, her eyes red from crying, her hands still shaking. "Mom, are you sure you're okay?" Linda reached out and cupped Emma's face in her hands. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm right where I need to be." Emma's lip trembled. "I thought I lost you." Linda smiled, a sad, tender smile. "You didn't. You never will." The wedding began an hour late, but no one minded. As Emma walked down the aisle, radiant and glowing, Linda stood beside Greg, watching her daughter take the next step in her life. And as the vows were exchanged, as tears were shed and laughter filled the room, Linda felt a strange, quiet peace settle over her. She thought of Margaret, the woman who had given her life, the woman who had loved her from a distance, the woman who had waited in the silence of an old house, hoping that one day her daughter would remember. And Linda made a silent promise. She would remember. She would honor the woman who gave her life. She would carry her story forward, not with shame, but with gratitude. Because sometimes, the people who love us most are the ones we never get to thank. Sometimes, the sacrifices made for us are hidden in the shadows, waiting to be found. And sometimes, the truth we've been running from is the very thing that sets us free. After the wedding, Linda returned to the house in the woods one more time. She brought flowers, white roses, Margaret's favorite. She placed them on the porch steps and stood there in the stillness, listening to the wind move through the trees. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for loving me. Thank you for letting me go so I could have a life. I'm sorry, it took me so long to come back." She stayed there for a long time, letting the memories wash over her, the good and the painful, the lost and the found. And when she finally turned to leave, she felt lighter, freer, as if a weight she had been carrying her entire life had finally been lifted. Emma asked her later, over coffee in the kitchen, what it all meant, what it changed. Linda thought about it, her hands wrapped around her mug, her gaze distant. "It changes everything and nothing," she said. "I'm still your mother. I'm still me. But now I understand why I've always felt like something was missing. Now I know where I came from. And that's enough." Emma reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "I'm glad you found her," she said softly. "I'm glad you found yourself." Linda smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Me too. So now, let me ask you, if you discovered a hidden part of your past, something buried so deep you didn't even know it existed, would you want to uncover it? Would you want to face the truth, even if it shattered everything you thought you knew? And if you were Emma, would you be able to forgive the secrets kept from you, the lies told for your protection? Think about the people in your life, the ones who raised you, the ones who loved you. How much do you really know about their stories, their sacrifices, their pain? Sometimes, the greatest act of love is letting go. Sometimes, the hardest truth is the one that sets us free. Linda Morrison lost herself for a few hours. But in doing so, she found the missing piece of her soul. And maybe that's the lesson here, that we are not defined by what we've forgotten, but by what we choose to remember. That our past doesn't have to haunt us, it can heal us. That even in the darkest moments, when we wake up lost and afraid, we can find our way home. Because home isn't just a place. It's a truth. It's a reckoning. It's the moment we stop running and finally, let ourselves be found. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you feel something deep and real, let us know in the comments. How would you have reacted in Linda's place? What would you have done? And remember, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, they matter. But so do the stories we've forgotten. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Stories that remind us that life is messy and beautiful and heartbreaking and real. Thank you for watching, and remember, You are never as lost as you think you are.